Some children grow up without ever feeling truly protected. Not from danger, not from fear, not from emotional pain. The strange part is, many don't realize this until they're adults. They grow up thinking their experience was normal. That constant alertness felt like responsibility. That early maturity seemed like strength. Learning to stay quiet, adaptable, and self-reliant appeared to be a skill, not a survival response. When you're never protected as a child, you don't grow up feeling unsafe. You grow up believing safety is something you must earn. Protection in childhood should be invisible. You shouldn't notice it. It exists quietly in the background. Someone watching, someone ready to step in, someone ensuring the world doesn't overwhelm you before you're ready. But when protection is missing, the child notices everything. They read tones changing in rooms. They sense moods before words are spoken. They feel tension before conflict erupts. Their nervous system learns it's completely alone. So the child adapts. They become observant beyond their years. They develop emotional intelligence that shouldn't be necessary yet. They learn to be careful about everything. Adults often praise this child. You're so mature. You don't need help. You're incredibly strong. What they're really saying is, you learned to survive quietly. The unprotected child learns one powerful lesson early. No one is coming to help. This belief shapes everything that follows. When children are protected, they learn the world has buffers. Mistakes don't equal disaster. Fear doesn't always bring consequences. Someone bigger will intervene when things go wrong. When children aren't protected, consequences feel immediate and personal. If something goes wrong, they'll pay the price. So they learn to prevent problems before they exist. This creates hyper-responsible adults. They don't wait for things to fall apart. They anticipate, prepare, carry weight before being asked. Not because they want control, but because unpredictability once felt dangerous. Their minds learned, if I stay alert, I can reduce pain. Over time, alertness becomes identity. They become the dependable one, the calm one, the one who never panics. But inside, their nervous system never truly rests. Another trait is emotional self-containment. They don't ask for help easily. They don't express needs freely. They don't assume anyone will respond. As children, expressing fear or confusion led nowhere, or worse, created more problems. So they learned to keep emotions internal, not from coldness, but from efficiency. Feeling something doesn't change anything. Handling it does. Emotions get processed privately, silently, alone. As adults, this looks like independence, but feels like isolation, even in close relationships. The unprotected child learns a different version of love. For protected children, love feels like consistency, presence, reassurance. For unprotected children, love feels conditional, earned through usefulness, compliance, being easy to manage. They learn that being low maintenance keeps peace, so they become adaptable versions of themselves, different personalities in different rooms, different emotional volumes for different people, not because they're fake, but because authenticity once had consequences. This is why many adults who were never protected struggle with knowing who they really are. They spent so much time adjusting that their original shape was never reflected back to them. These individuals often either distrust authority deeply or become overly compliant with it. Authority figures may have been unpredictable, absent, or emotionally unavailable, so their brain learned two strategies: avoid reliance or avoid conflict. This often becomes quiet perfectionism, not the obvious kind, but the internal belief that mistakes are costly, preparation is necessary, relaxing invites chaos. Perfectionism becomes protection in disguise, and burnout becomes the price. There's also deep emotional loneliness, even when surrounded by people. Protection isn't just physical presence, it's emotional containment, knowing someone is holding the weight with you. When that's missing in childhood, closeness later feels unfamiliar, not unwanted, just foreign. Many crave connection, but feel uncomfortable receiving care. They give easily and listen deeply, but when roles reverse, something tightens inside. Being cared for requires surrender, and surrender once felt unsafe.
From a neurological standpoint, this makes sense. A child's nervous system calibrates based on early experiences. When safety is inconsistent, the system stays on high alert. Even years later, in calm environments, the body remembers. This is why rest feels uncomfortable, silence feels heavy, stillness brings anxiety instead of peace. The body learned that danger comes when attention drops, so it stays ready always. But here's what most people miss. The child who was never protected didn't just lose something, they developed something extraordinary. Deep awareness, strong internal compass, sensitivity to emotional undercurrents. These individuals understand pain without explanation. They recognize unspoken struggles. They carry empathy that wasn't taught, only lived. But empathy without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Strength without softness becomes isolation. Healing doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means teaching the nervous system something new, that safety can exist without constant effort, that support can be consistent, that rest doesn't equal vulnerability. For many adults, this is slow because the mind understands safety faster than the body. You can know intellectually you're safe and still feel tense. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means your system learned survival early, and survival patterns need repetition, gentleness, and time to change. One crucial step is learning to recognize needs without judgment, not dismissing them as weakness, not minimizing them as unnecessary. Needs don't come from immaturity, they come from being human. Another step is learning to receive without performing, to allow care without earning it, to rest without justification, to be supported without guilt. This feels uncomfortable at first because the old belief whispers, if I don't hold it together, everything falls apart. But that belief belonged to a child. Adults can update the rules slowly and gently. The psychology of the unprotected child isn't a story of damage. It's a story of adaptation, of a nervous system that learned too much too soon, of a mind that carried responsibility before it had language for it, and of an adult who is still learning that safety doesn't always have to be constructed. Sometimes it can simply be allowed. When that realization finally lands, it changes everything. There's something deeply confusing about realizing as an adult that you were strong because you had no choice, not because someone trained you, not because you were naturally resilient, but because there was no one else to hold the weight. This realization doesn't arrive loudly, it comes quietly, in moments of exhaustion, in relationships that feel strangely draining, in the sense that no matter what you achieve, something still feels unheld. What was missing wasn't love in words, it was safety in action. Protection teaches one simple truth: you don't have to handle it alone. When that truth is never learned, independence becomes overdeveloped and dependence feels threatening. This is why many struggle with delegation, trust, and rest. They don't just prefer control, they associate control with survival. From a psychological standpoint, this is the nervous system preventing overwhelm by minimizing uncertainty. If you do everything yourself, nothing surprises you. If nothing surprises you, nothing hurts you the way it once did. But this creates a life where you're always the container and rarely the contained. Another lasting effect shows up in how these individuals process failure.
For protected children, failure is an experience. For unprotected children, failure feels like exposure. It doesn't just mean something went wrong, it feels like something dangerous could follow. So mistakes become heavy, not from ego, but because the nervous system associates errors with risk. This creates quiet inner pressure to be competent always, to not need correction, to not create inconvenience. As adults, this becomes chronic self-monitoring, replaying conversations, second-guessing decisions, overanalyzing tone and timing. The mind is still scanning for safety cues. True intimacy requires the ability to soften, to let someone see you without preparation, to trust that care will remain even when you're not performing strength. For someone who was never protected, this feels foreign. They may crave closeness deeply, yet feel uncomfortable when someone gets too close. They want support, but struggle to accept it without feeling indebted. They long to be understood, but hide vulnerable parts because vulnerability once came without protection. This creates push and pull dynamics in relationships. Connection feels healing, dependence feels unsafe, so they oscillate between closeness and distance, often without realizing why. It's not fear of love, it's fear of being unguarded. There's also specific grief that surfaces later in life. Not obvious or dramatic grief, but quiet grief of realizing you never had the option to just be a child, that your calmness wasn't maturity, it was adaptation, that your emotional intelligence wasn't taught, it was required. This grief shows up as sadness without clear story, loss without specific memory, an ache that doesn't attach to one moment, but to an entire phase of life. This is delayed processing. The mind protected itself by postponing emotional integration until safety became possible. So feelings arrive later, and when they do, they feel overwhelming, not because they're new, but because they were held back so long. Many mistake this stage for regression. They think something is wrong. In reality, it's the nervous system finally feeling safe enough to release what it once had to suppress. This isn't weakness, it's completion. Often, unprotected children develop a strong internal narrator, a voice that guides, warns, plans, prepares. This voice was once helpful. It kept them alert, ahead of problems. But over time, it becomes exhausting because it doesn't know how to turn off. Even in calm moments, it scans for what could go wrong. Even in success, it prepares for the next threat. Even in rest, it whispers that rest should be earned. Learning to soften this voice isn't about silencing it. It's about teaching it that danger is no longer constant, that protection can come from within differently, not through vigilance, but through self-trust. One of the most healing experiences is being believed without explanation, not having to justify pain, prove exhaustion, or explain why something feels hard, just being met. This is often when something shifts, because for the first time, the nervous system receives a new message. I don't have to convince anyone to take me seriously. And slowly, the body begins to relax its grip. That mistakes don't equal abandonment, that rest doesn't lead to chaos. This learning doesn't happen through logic alone. It happens through repeated experiences of safety, through relationships that remain steady, through boundaries that are respected, through moments where you don't collapse when you let go. And perhaps most importantly, through learning to protect yourself in ways you never experienced, not by becoming harder, but by becoming kinder to your limits. Protection in adulthood looks different. It looks like choosing environments that don't require constant alertness, honoring your capacity instead of pushing past it, allowing emotions to move through you instead of locking them inside, recognizing you no longer need to be the strongest person in every room. And safety can now be learned, not perfectly, not overnight, but gently. The child who was never protected grew into an adult who knows how to survive. The next chapter is about learning how to live, to experience moments without scanning them, to receive care without preparing for loss, to rest without waiting for consequences. This isn't forgetting what happened, it's building something new from it, a life where strength and softness can exist together, where awareness doesn't cost peace, where responsibility doesn't erase joy. And slowly, over time, the nervous system learns something it never did before, that it's finally safe to exhale. And that's not weakness, that's healing.